What if the royal fairy tale millions celebrated was never the real story at all? What if the birth that was supposed to symbolize a new chapter for the modern monarchy was actually wrapped in layers of secrecy, contradictions, and whispers that refuse to disappear no matter how hard the palace tries to polish the narrative? Because for years, the world was told that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's son Archie arrived in a moment of quiet dignity, a carefully controlled private event meant to protect their family from the chaos of royal life. But now, the story is cracking. Details that once sounded simple are suddenly colliding with timelines that don't match, medical claims that experts say make no sense, and insiders who are quietly asking the same chilling question: was the public given the truth or a perfectly staged version of it? And right in the center of this growing storm stands Candace Owens, who has taken these scattered doubts and turned them into a loud, unavoidable challenge to the royal narrative itself.
In this case, about whether you think the birth was real, whether you think there was a surrogate, whether you think Meghan was wearing a moon bump, the fact is, Harry and Meghan lied. Buckingham Palace lied on their behalf. There was a complete cover-up over the birth of Prince Archie.
I can't stand the inauthenticity. It has to stop. I tried with you, Meghan, really. You gotta pick a lane, you gotta stay in it, okay? That's all I'm saying.
Like, why lie? It was just so truly bizarre.
That belly looks very abnormal. It looks very strange. If you look up close in the video, and I encourage people, look at this. It looks like there's like a bag or like some sort of something shoved up under a dress. It does not look like a pregnant belly. It looks all bumpy. It's very strange. It looks like what you'd get if you put like a pillowcase full of like socks or something.
For a long time, the arrival of Archie Harrison was supposed to represent something hopeful, a modern royal baby born into a new era where tradition and independence could coexist. Meghan and Harry made it clear from the beginning that they wanted to do things differently. No hospital steps photo, no crowds of reporters, no instant royal announcement like previous births. Instead, they framed the secrecy as an act of empowerment, a statement that their child would grow up protected from the relentless glare of the royal spotlight. And at first, people applauded it. Many even praised Meghan for pushing back against traditions that often seemed cold and outdated. But then the timeline started to wobble. Small details began clashing with each other in ways that felt strange. And once those cracks appeared, people started digging.
Meghan is a trained actress. What she does is that she studies people. She's not a good actress, but she is a trained one, right? She's been doing it her entire life. And there was no doubt that she studied Princess Diana. She studied her mannerisms towards Harry when he was a boy and the way that she grabs her face. And this is the psychopathic elements of what she does, putting a pregnancy text next to Princess Diana's hair, saying that she put her hands on the grave to have a conversation with her, bursting into tears. And she has convinced, there's a thing called in psychology called the Freudian transfer.
Something like that. So she wasn't even pregnant. So it's very weird. And Harry, it was said to Harry, not to her. I mean, she just came in.
Because according to critics and royal watchers who began comparing statements, memoir passages, and media reports, the official version of Archie's birth didn't just feel unusual, it started to look nearly impossible. Suddenly, every small detail became a clue. Harry's own memoir described moments in the hospital that sounded cinematic, almost scripted. Meghan was said to have received not one, but 2 epidurals during labor. Then, according to the story, she was discharged from the hospital incredibly quickly and returned home with the newborn within hours. At first glance, it sounded like a heroic tale of strength and resilience. But when medical professionals heard those details, their reactions were immediate and skeptical.
She has convinced Harry that she is Princess Diana, except this time he has an opportunity to save her. That is the truth, and it's worked, right? So she's done this convincing performance for Harry that I don't know how I ended here, I just love you, and I'm just like your mom. And the one chance that you had to save your mom again, when he recounts that tale and the things that she said, she threatened homicide on her unborn child and suicide on herself. And then she convinced Harry that it was his idea to leave the UK.
If he can't see the writing on the wall that she is trying to embody his mother, even when he told a story about how she said she was gonna commit suicide while she was pregnant and that she was having suicidal thoughts, and you can see in everything that she does, she tries to put this pressure on him of like, well, look what happened to your mom. Like, that could happen to me unless we do exactly what I want, which is to move back to Los Angeles and to be the A-list actress that I never was and to be in those circles.
Doctors and nurses began quietly pointing out something that shattered the polished narrative. Epidurals aren't simple injections you casually repeat during labor. They involve inserting a catheter near the spine, a delicate procedure that is carefully monitored by medical teams. Replacing one epidural with another during the same labor would be extremely rare and medically risky. And that was only the beginning of the confusion, because Harry's account suggested Meghan left the hospital astonishingly fast, far faster than standard medical protocols would ever allow after such procedures. Even in smooth deliveries, hospitals typically keep mothers under observation for many hours, sometimes a full day, to monitor blood pressure, recovery, and the baby's condition. Yet this royal timeline seemed to move at lightning speed.
And I think that she's manipulated him using the death of his mother, which is so creepy and so scary. And I think that he's got some weird maternal syndrome with her, and that he thinks that he can somehow save his mother by doing everything and making sure that Meghan is happy.
If you had those things, it would be very easy just to put them out there and say, this is what happened. You know, this is what it is.
And that is where the whispers turned into serious suspicion. Because if the medical timeline doesn't make sense, then what exactly happened during those hours that the public never saw? Was it simply a misremembered detail in Harry's memoir? Or was the story shaped deliberately to create a narrative of strength and privacy while quietly hiding something else entirely? The moment people began asking those questions, the entire birth story transformed from a private royal moment into a public puzzle that refuses to be solved.
With either Archie or Lily, and it needs to happen. They need to prove that those children, Meghan and Harry, are not entitled to privacy in this matter, and their privacy is trumped by our right to know that no bastard is going to sit on the throne of this country.
He describes her very well, and he does this by taking a look.
Absolute media manipulation. But I thought tonight this was really ridiculous.
The Portland Hospital in London, where Archie was reportedly born, is one of the most exclusive maternity hospitals in the world. Celebrities and wealthy families often choose it for its privacy and luxury. But even the most high-end hospitals still follow strict medical guidelines. And that's why the timeline described by Harry raised so many eyebrows among medical professionals. 2 epidurals, a rapid recovery, and leaving the hospital almost immediately afterward doesn't just sound unusual. According to experts, it clashes with how childbirth medicine actually works. And once that detail entered the conversation, the entire narrative began unraveling piece by piece. Critics pointed out that childbirth isn't something anyone simply walks away from in a couple of hours, no matter how wealthy or privileged they are. Hospitals carefully monitor mothers after delivery to prevent complications like bleeding, nerve damage, or sudden drops in blood pressure. Even the most straightforward births involve a series of checks and recovery periods before a mother is cleared to leave. Yet the royal version described a lightning-fast exit that seemed more like a movie montage than a real medical event. Suddenly, people weren't just questioning one detail, they were questioning the entire sequence of events. And the deeper investigators looked, the stranger the situation appeared. Because the confusion didn't stop with the hospital timeline. It spread into how the palace handled the announcement of Archie's birth itself. Traditionally, royal births follow a very specific pattern. The monarch is informed first. An official notice is placed on display. Then the press is briefed and the world celebrates together. But when Archie arrived, that routine seemed to collapse completely. Different reporters received different updates about whether Meghan was still in labor or had already delivered. Some were told the baby had been born hours earlier. Others were given timelines that didn't match at all. For journalists who had covered royal births for decades, the chaos felt almost impossible. Palace systems are built around precision and protocol. Confusion on this scale simply doesn't happen by accident. And that's why speculation exploded. People started asking whether the confusion was deliberate, a way to blur the timeline so no one could clearly see what really happened that day. Suddenly, theories that once sounded outrageous began creeping into mainstream conversation. Some critics suggested the secrecy might have been about protecting Meghan's privacy. Others believed the palace was trying to control the narrative before rumors could spread. But then, a more controversial possibility emerged, one that has fueled debate for years. What if the secrecy wasn't about privacy at all? What if it was about hiding something that didn't fit the traditional royal story? Candace Owens seized on those inconsistencies and amplified them, arguing that when the small details collapse, the entire story becomes impossible to trust. According to her critics, Meghan's version of events sounds less like a straightforward birth story and more like a carefully crafted narrative designed to project strength, resilience, and independence. But when that narrative collides with medical reality, it raises uncomfortable questions about why the story was told that way in the first place. And once public trust begins to crack, rebuilding it becomes almost impossible. Because now, every small contradiction feels like another missing puzzle piece piece in a mystery that refuses to disappear. Some insiders have even whispered about strange details inside the hospital itself. Staff members reportedly questioned certain parts of Harry's memoir, including descriptions of secret elevators and unusual food deliveries that didn't match how the hospital actually operates. None of those details prove anything on their own, but when you stack them alongside the timeline confusion and the medical contradictions, they create a picture that feels increasingly messy. A story that once seemed simple now looks tangled in layers of uncertainty. And that uncertainty has become the real story, because every time the couple shares a new detail about their life, critics immediately compare it to previous statements, searching for anything that doesn't line up. Every new interview, every memoir excerpt, every public appearance by Meghan or Harry is now analyzed through the lens of those earlier contradictions. Critics look for inconsistencies. Supporters defend the couple passionately, and the divide between the two camps continues to grow wider. But perhaps the most fascinating part of this entire saga is how the mystery refuses to fade. Normally, controversies fade over time as new headlines replace old ones, but the questions surrounding Archie's birth have lingered for years. In fact, they've only grown louder as more royal insiders and commentators weigh in. Some say the truth is simple. A private couple tried to protect their newborn from the chaos of royal tradition, and small storytelling mistakes turned into a massive internet conspiracy. Others believe something very different. They argue that the contradictions are too numerous to ignore, that the palace's unusual handling of the birth suggests there may have been more happening behind the scenes than the public was allowed to see. And then there are those who think the entire situation represents something even bigger, a clash between two worlds. On one side is the centuries-old monarchy, built on strict traditions, documentation, and transparency when it comes to royal succession. On the other side is Meghan Markle, a modern celebrity who entered that world with a completely different understanding of privacy, media, and narrative control. When those two worlds collided, the result may have been exactly what we're seeing now: confusion, contradictions, and a story that keeps evolving every time it's retold. But even with all the speculation, one thing remains undeniably true. No official investigation has ever confirmed wrongdoing. No verified evidence has proven that the birth story was fabricated. And yet, the doubts remain. Because when a narrative contains enough conflicting details, the human mind naturally tries to fill in the gaps. Questions multiply, theories spread, and soon the mystery becomes bigger than the event itself. That's exactly where this royal saga stands today. Candace Owens may have reignited the debate, but the questions she highlighted were already simmering beneath the surface. Questions about timelines, about medical claims, about why the palace handled the birth so differently from every royal birth before it. Questions that still don't have clear answers. And as long as those answers remain elusive, the speculation will continue to grow. Because the deeper people look into this story, the more it begins to feel like we've only seen the carefully polished version of events. A version shaped by royal public relations, media narratives, and personal storytelling. But somewhere behind that polished version, there may still be a truth waiting to surface. And if that truth ever does come out, whether it confirms the official story or completely reshapes it, it could change how the public sees not only Meghan and Harry, but the entire modern monarchy. Until then, the contradictions remain like puzzle pieces that refuse to fit. The timelines still clash, the medical claims still raise eyebrows, and the biggest question of all continues to hang in the air like an unsolved royal riddle. Was Archie's birth simply a private moment misunderstood by the public? Or was the world given a story that was carefully crafted long before anyone started asking questions? Because if this controversy has proven anything, it's that royal mysteries rarely disappear. They wait, they simmer, and sometimes they explode years later when someone finally decides to look a little closer behind the palace walls. Behind the palace walls.